What's up fellow hunters, Nox here, welcome to another exciting build video. Today we're going to talk about Gunlance. I will show a non-augmented budget version first that is super easy to make, and a upgraded version with augments right after to give you some extra ideas. Let's go! We're gonna kick things off with the boomstick, a super flexible, high damage all-round build. The talisman I'm using is a Hellfire Cloak level 4 with 3 level 2 slots, but Hellfire Cloak level 3 and 1 level 2 slot is already enough to get you all the essential skills. That said, talismans like this one are super easy to get now if you don't have one yet. All you have to do is use the Cyclops Melding and select Hellfire Cloak. If you have enough materials, you can get one in a matter of minutes. Weapon of choice is the Primordial Malzeno Gunlance. 365 attack, 72 dragon, purple sharpness, and fantastic slots. We're also gonna see additional weapon choices after the build. The first thing we need to address is everything that increases shelling damage, starting with artillery. At level 3, it increases shell damage by a massive 30% and reduces Wyvern Fire cooldown by 50%. This is one of the most essential skills for Gunlance. Load shells will simply add an additional shell to the ammo capacity, which of course increases DPS. Next we have Sneak Attack, which works incredibly well with Gunlance in Sunbreak. At level 3, this will give us a 20% damage boost whenever we attack the monster from behind its middle point. This 20% damage boost will apply to all kinds of shelling and physical damage. Getting behind a monster's middle point can be achieved super easily by making use of Reverse Blast Dash. Another way to increase shelling damage further is to eat for the Bombardier Dango skill. This will add another 10%. I highly recommend always doing this. Then we have Attack Boost level 7 for a big increase to raw attack. And we also have a super high affinity setup. Weakness Exploit, Maximum Might, and Bloodlust will set us at 100% affinity on weak spots. Along with that, we of course have Critical Boost to get the most out of our critical hits. Hellfire Cloak level 3 and 4 will give us the Hellfire Blight every time a monster gets enraged. Using certain Silkbind attacks will drop the Hellfire on the ground. The first time a monster gets in contact with the Hellfire, it will be knocked over immediately, giving us a free damage window. There will also be small explosions that deal some extra damage. Coalescence will synergize with Hellfire Cloak and Bloodlust, which will give us an additional attack boost. Next, we have one of the core skills of the build, Heaven Sent. When the skill is active, swapping scrolls restores 50 hits of sharpness. But as you can see in the upper left corner, on Gunlance it also reloads all ammo and the Wormstake, which is fantastic. And we have another skill that enhances scroll swapping as well, Redirection level 2. When swapping right before we get hit, we take no damage at all and automatically perform a swap evade backwards. On top of that, it also recovers 50% of our wirebug gauge. Heaven Sent and Redirection have incredible synergy on Gunlance. We can evade attacks without taking any damage, reload all of our ammo, recover sharpness, and recover wirebug gauge all at the same time. We want to be able to use Silkbind attacks as frequently as possible with Gunlance. Because of that, we have 3 more skills that help with Wirebug Gauge recovery and maintenance. Wirebug Whisperer level 3 and Wind Mantle level 1 will increase Wirebug recovery speed by about 25%. And Frenzied Bloodlust will give us an additional Wirebug when overcoming the effect of Frenzy. How long we get to keep that Wirebug will depend on the level of the skill. These 3 skills combined with Redirection give us fantastic uptime on the Wirebug Gauge. The build also comes with 3 levels of guard to make blocking more effective. But to be honest, the Reverse Blast Dash skill we have in Sunbreak is so good that I almost never block. The skill has invincibility frames, super armor, and lets you move incredibly fast for repositioning. It's better than blocking in every aspect. And with this build, we always have the necessary wirebug to use it. As a bonus, we have Intrepid Heart and Shock Absorber for added comfort and safety, as well as Blood Rite for some health regeneration. The augment recommendations are super simple. Adding more Wind Mantle will increase the wirebug recovery speed further. It's not necessary, but a good choice. And the same thing applies to Frenzied Bloodlust. Adding at least 1 level of Powder Mantle into the build is highly recommended. It will give us a nice DPS boost. Aside from that, additional slots are great to have. Now we're going to take a look at my version of the build that includes augments. We'll get to what exactly my augments are in a moment as well. As you can see, the build doesn't change much when upgraded. The first thing I did was max out Wind Mantle. Next I added Powder Mantle level 3 and Burst level 2 into the build for more damage. Then I went for Defiance level 3 and a bit of stun resistance for added comfort. Also because I had slots left over. This is what my current augments are looking like if you're trying to recreate a similar version of the build. Just like the recommendations, this is very simple. 2 extra levels of Wind Mantle and 3 levels of Powder Mantle. As I mentioned, 1 level of Powder Mantle is enough and you definitely don't have to go for level 3. But since I had these augmented parts already, I decided to use them. These are the other best weapon options for the build. We have the Kimura, Lucent Nagakuga, Scorned Magnamalo, and Basil Gunlance. The Velkhana Gunlance is also a good choice. There are plenty of other options as well, so feel free to pick whatever you like. If you end up missing slots, you can always drop the Coalescence or some of the attack boost. They aren't essential skills to the build. For the Rampage decoration, stick to the anti-species decos. Next, we have an all-out bullet barrage build, the Final Flash. Let's see how many of you in the comments know what the name of this build is a reference to. The skill priority for bullet barrage builds is completely different from anything else. Because of that, the build looks kind of incomplete at first, but that is gonna change a lot in a moment when we get to the upgraded version. The talisman I'm using for this one has earplugs level 5 and 3 level 2 slots. Just as before, you can easily farm this with the Cyclos Melding. Cool thing is, the talisman is actually completely optional here, and you can change it if you want. We're gonna see why I chose earplugs later on. Weapon of choice is the Amatsu Gunlance. What we really want here is the built-in special effect that all Amatsu weapons have. They all get a 10% damage boost to Silkbind attacks, which is of course perfect for Bullet Barrage. The goal here is very simple, and that is to deal massive damage by using Bullet Barrage as often as possible. In order to achieve that, we again have the 4 skills from earlier that influence the Wirebug gauge. Wirebug Whisperer, Wind Mantle, and Redirection to speed up Wirebug gauge recovery, and maxed out Frenzied Bloodlust to give us an additional Wirebug for 90 seconds every time we overcome Frenzy. This will allow us to get as much use out of Bullet Barrage as possible. The only other essential damage skills for this build is everything that enhances shell damage, which again is Artillery, Load Shells, and Sneak Attack. Here's why I chose to go for earplugs. Usually, going for Defiance level 3 or 5 is enough and there's no need for earplugs. But for this kind of build, I find earplugs way more reliable and convenient, especially on multi-monster quests where everything just runs around screaming randomly. You can see in the background footage that I'm definitely getting value out of it. And since Bullet Barrage builds don't have many essential skills, we can easily fit this in here. But as I mentioned, it's completely optional. We now also have Quick Breath in the build. When swapping scrolls, this will remove status ailments and heal us in the process. Of course, this will also synergize with Redirection and Heaven Sent. This skill is optional as well and can be replaced with anything else if you like. Because Heaven Sent is down to level 1 and takes a bit longer to activate, we also have Razor Sharp for some additional sharpness management, giving us a 50% chance of not losing sharpness when landing attacks at all times. Aside from that, we have Evade Extender for increased mobility, as well as Intrepid Heart, Bloodright, and Shock Absorber for added comfort. The rest is going to be covered in the upgraded version. As a quick side note, you can also increase Bullet Barrage damage with the Frostcraft skill. But in order to use that skill properly, we have to keep sheathing our weapon, which sadly goes against Frenzied Bloodlust. We then would end up losing the extra Wirebug, which of course results in a direct DPS loss as well, since we then wouldn't be able to use Bullet Barrage as frequently. Augment recommendations are very similar to the previous ones. Even though level 2 and 3 for Wind Mantle add smaller value than level 1, it is recommended to go as high as possible here. At least one level of Powder Mantle is highly recommended again as well. And as I mentioned a moment ago, Frostcraft is going to be an optional choice. If you decide to go for it, definitely aim for level 3. Anything lower is not worth it. The upgraded version of the build changes quite a bit. The first thing I did was swap out the legs. This allowed me to get maxed out Part Breaker into the build, which makes health regeneration with Bloodright much easier. Next, I added max defense boost into the build to make it even tankier than it already was. Aside from that, I again maxed out Wind Mantle and added some Powder Mantle for extra damage. Instead of going for attack boost level 4, you can also go for weakness exploit level 3. It doesn't make much of a difference here. These are my current augments. The first thing I had to add was one level of Frenzied Bloodlust since I swapped out the legs. After that, it's nearly the exact same as before since we're using a lot of the same parts. The only other difference in my case are the legs with Evade Extender, which isn't even necessary. Next, we have the Coalition, a comfy template that combines old school and new school Gunlance while giving you tons of customizing options. The talisman I'm using for this one is a guard level 5. To get all the essentials, it only needs one level 2 slot. To demonstrate the build, I'm using the Lucent Nargacuga Gunlance as example, but this build can be used with any Gunlance you want. The ones I showed earlier are great options here. We have the same damage essentials as the first build: Artillery, Load Shells, and Sneak Attack to increase shell damage. Wirebug Whisperer, Wind Mantle, and Frenzied Bloodlust to increase Silkbind attack usage. Max attack boost and a high affinity setup to increase raw damage on physical hits. And then we have a few big differences. The first one is that this build comes with guard level 5 and one level of guard up. This will greatly improve all forms of guarding and allow us to block unblockable attacks, making this build a great choice if you like hiding behind your shield or if you're just starting out with Gunlance. And secondly, you can choose any sharpness management skill you like to have. The protective polish you can see in the build now is just an example. I personally added extra levels of handicraft. And keep in mind that you will still have Heaven Sent level 1 in the build as backup, meaning that you will still be able to restore sharpness by swapping scrolls when the skill is active. Aside from that, we again have Intrepid Heart, Bloodright, and Shock Absorber for added comfort and safety. As a bonus, the build also comes with 1 level of Powder Mantle for some nice extra damage. The augment recommendations are similar to the previous ones with one big difference. If you decide to pick any of the status Gunlances, going for at least 1 level of build up boost has good additional value. Aside from that, either of the 2 mantle skills or slot upgrades are the way to go. Since this build is a template, there's no upgraded version. If you're not sure where to start with Gunlance, this build is the perfect starting point. Make sure to check out the other builds for all kinds of weapons on the channel so you don't miss anything you might enjoy. Thanks for watching, take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.